Today we're going to save about 300 euros on an AIS transponder for our boat. And while we're at it, we'll sail along the Cantabrian coast to test it out a bit. And I'm just going to clean my glasses for a moment because my vision is a little bit blurry. Greetings sailors and welcome to a new episode of the Low Cost Sailor. In today's episode we're going to test the cheapest AIS transponder I've been able to find, which of course is Chinese. Total Chinese.
Chinese from China, right?
Yes, from China, but I do not say that as something negative. Officially they call it a locator for fishing nets, but we will see that it is actually a fully functional AIS transponder that we will be able to add our boat's identification information to, and it will make us visible to the rest of the boats, greatly improving navigation safety, especially at night or in adverse conditions. We'll also see that, thanks to websites like Localiza Todo, it will allow us to share our position with friends throughout our trips, and that's exactly what I did with the one we're going to take a look at in this video. Please be advised that although this is a CE certified device, it is not officially approved and its use as a fishing net locator is prohibited in many countries. This is because AIS can only be used to locate ships, which on the other hand is what we are going to use it for.
I picture those merchant marine folks as a group of evil villains in a dark room saying, "Ha ha ha ha."
This cannot be, and they have put it away in a drawer. They're probably like that. You're going to think it's a really important safety feature, but when it comes to important safety features, they also want us to pay up, because they only like more expensive things. And although the device does not perfectly meet all the features of the AIS protocol, we will see that it perfectly fulfills the function of improving the visibility of our boat. What it is, and why it can be so useful to us for increasing the safety of our boats. The acronym AIS comes from English and stands for Automatic Identification System, which basically means Automatic Identification System. And what is it really about? Well, it's a transponder system, very similar to what happens in airplanes with ADS-B, which, through VHF radio frequencies and by using a specific protocol, transmits a vessel's identification data to everyone who is listening, along with its course and speed. This means that anyone listening with an appropriate system can pick up those signals and identify the vessels around them at a range of several thousand meters, typically about the same range as your boat's VHF radio, together with their course, speed, type of vessel, dimensions, draft, and even what it is used for, such as whether it's a sailboat or a fishing vessel. Basically, it's quite similar to a radar, but a bit more advanced and also much cheaper to implement, especially if all we really want is simply to see the boats around us. In fact, as you may have seen in our episode number 11 here, we showed how to build a receiver using a Raspberry Pi and a USB TV tuner that allowed us to see the boats around us. Now we are going to take it one step further and see how to transmit our position. It also has its drawbacks, for example when compared with radar, since it is only mandatory on passenger vessels and on large cargo ships above a certain size, but at the same time its Class B version is increasingly being seen on all kinds of recreational boats. And we hope that thanks to this video, and seeing that it can be quite affordable, we will see it on even more vessels. In the end, being able to see the large ships around you is going to be extremely useful because it will allow you to plan your course in advance to avoid them. For example, when you are sailing through a narrow channel under sail, knowing that a ferry or a large ship is coming will allow us to move out of the way in time. But at the same time, being able to transmit our identification, position and course will give us the reassurance of being clearly visible to the large vessels around us, so that they can also avoid us to some extent, or even warn us directly over the radio, and even if we need assistance, our position will be transmitted in real time to all the boats around us nearby. If you have already reviewed our episode 11 to get a receiver, or if you simply want to be seen and want to add it to your boat, then the device we are going to look at is quite affordable. It will still work even in emergency situations if your electronic systems fail, and it will allow us to be clearly seen and identified from many miles away. And of course we can switch it on or off whenever we want, depending on our needs. We don't have to keep it running continuously, of course. We can still maintain some privacy. Let's get to the shopping part. This time the purchases are going to be very simple. Honestly, it had been a while since I had seen these AIS buoys on AliExpress designed for tracking fishing nets, and they seemed too inexpensive to me, at least compared with certified AIS systems, which is a whole different story, but at the same time, very versatile. If they could be used on a boat like mine, because they run on a battery, have their own antenna, and don't require any kind of installation, so I decided to buy one for 65 euros, plus another 15 euros for the programming cable. In the end, it cost me a little under 85 euros, which is about what they cost now, and you'll see that in the links. There are several models, all very similar. What changes is whether they have an internal antenna or a removable one. This one has a fixed internal antenna, and specifically I bought this one you see here together with its programming cable. This is really important if you're only going to buy one, or if you don't have a friend who already has the programming cable, has already bought it, and lives close by. You can even consider me a cable buddy if you're around Santander, because you really do need to get that programming cable, since it's important for entering your boat's MMSI. I chose this type of device because it is very inexpensive and because I already had the Raspberry to use as a receiver. Otherwise, there is a very popular transmitter also not approved by the General Directorate of the Merchant Marine, which does not like cheap things, such as the Masutec HA102, which will also appear here, which is also very popular among resourceful sailors and which is both a transmitter and a receiver. Although the installation is already a bit more complex because you have to place its antenna outside, you have to install its GPS. This is really quite easy to install. In any case, I'll leave all the links down in the description, and that also reminds me that sometimes some of you ask me for the links to the products shown in the videos, and in the end I always end up saying the exact same thing, that I'm redirecting you to the description or to the website. If you are watching us from a computer, on YouTube's web version, you can expand the description by clicking the Show More text that appears below the video, and there you will always find all the links in our videos. If you're watching us from the mobile app, you can expand the description by using the little arrow that appears just below the video on the right, and if you're watching us on a smart TV, I honestly have no idea. I really don't know how you can actually view the links from a smart TV. In any case, there is always a post for each of our videos on our website www.thelocostsailor.com, which you may visit later at any time to use our shopping links to find the products you have seen. Using our links to buy the things we show you on Amazon and AliExpress helps us keep the channel going and at least lets us buy new Chinese gadgets to test for you. Just as a note, so you know. Alright, let's get to the unboxing. Well then, this is what we have received. It arrived, you can see it here. Here it says IPX7 waterproof send real-time is location info. And this is what it labels as Net Locator RS109 MEM, 5 watts of power, which is what's legal for AIS-B, and the frequencies it transmits on, because it transmits the 2 frequencies it can transmit on. So at first glance it looks great, the packaging seems quite decent, and inside this is what we have. Well, I don't remember whether this came inside or not, which is the programming cable. Our buoy is IPX, meaning it's submersible to I don't know how much. It floats and floats, yes. And also, if you notice something very important, it has the C marking here. So in the box we get the buoy. If we haven't purchased the cable, the user instructions, which are basically for use as a fishing net, what the different light flashes mean. It says the operating time is 360 hours. You can do the math yourselves, but I've had it running for more than 8 days non-stop and there's no problem. And then we set the charger aside here. The charger has a US style plug, but it also comes with this adapter for a European style plug, and it is basically a 9.2 volt 1 amp charger. And essentially what you have is this. It unscrews right here with its connectors for the charger and the switch to turn it on. We'll take a look at this outside once we have it configured. The connectors can't be mixed up. Only one port takes the charger and the programming cable, which is this included USB cable. It has one connector that plugs into the power port and a second connector that plugs into the programming port. And then what we have right here is the USB cable that will connect to the computer, which we're going to take a look at right now. We'll plug it into our computer here and then see exactly how it actually works. That said, there was no trace of the software needed to program it. In fact, there were no instructions at all, and I had to contact the Chinese seller through AliExpress chat, who sent me several links that did not work until I finally got the correct link to download the software. In any case, to make things easier for you for all versions, in the post on our website you have a link, and in the description the necessary software to be able to program it, which is what we are going to look at now during the setup. So we are going to start the computer and we are going to see how the software works. Well, once it is connected via USB to our computer and turned off for the moment, the first step is to obtain the software to configure it. What you will download will be a RAR file. If you download it from our website, we may change the name slightly so that it is not full of Chinese characters. You will need to extract it, which will produce another folder full of Chinese characters, and in it we will find the most important executable file, which is the one that will allow us to configure the buoy. We'll start it up now. Here you can clearly see that it's running version 1.7, and well, if we switch it over to English, everything becomes a bit more straightforward. So here we have the test series MMSI, which displays a test vessel name, the default transmission frequency, which is one transmission every 2 minutes, and a set of fields where we can enter some additional information. We can also log the data with a password in case it ever gets stolen or something like that, but in principle we are not going to do that. So the next step will be to turn on the beacon by turning its knob. You will see that the lights on it will turn on, and from this point, with everything connected properly, the very first check is to click read. If we click read and it says it was successful, that means everything is connected properly. In our case, since our beacon already had the MMSI programmed, what we see is that it successfully retrieves the data we programmed, our MMSI, our vessel's name, and the transmission frequency, which we had changed to the fastest possible setting, meaning once every 30 seconds. Additionally, if you look at this 52 that's shown here under reference point A, which in the AIS system normally refers to that specific point, AB represents the boat's overall length and CD represents the boat's beam. In this case, it is probably what I like least about this beacon. It uses it to tell us how much battery is left, so we can check the battery with the cable connected or with any AIS system by looking at the supposed length of our boat that it will display. Additionally, we also have the option to indicate precisely what type of vessel ours is, which is encoded using a particular number that we can select, and I will leave you the link. You can also view it on any chart where you can access the full list of all the vessel types that the system supports. In our case, we have chosen to be number 36, which is a sailboat, but we could also perfectly well choose to be a recreational vessel, which would be number 37. With all this data already filled in, the extended information as I mentioned, I do not fill in the length nor the rest of the length and beam fields so that it does not create confusion and make it seem as though that is actually the length of my boat. I can even uncheck it so that it does not save the information, although in any case I have already saved it, and then the vessel type and everything related to that will be targeted. We simply click Write. It will then tell us that the information has been saved successfully. And to confirm that, we click Read Bay. It should indicate OK, and at the same time show the data we tested. With this, we should already have the beacon prepared, and the only thing left is to understand it and begin the test. Once we have programmed all the data for our vessel into our AIS beacon, we can unplug it. It will be charged and ready to be used. Just remember to do this outside, because it really doesn't handle things very well if we turn it on without GPS. You simply turn this on and it will immediately start picking up signals, and if you'd like, you can put the cover back on, and now we'll see how we're going to properly secure it outside. Alright, and that is it. Now it is simply a matter of turning it on outside the boat, finding a good location. The higher it is, the farther it will reach, just like any VHF antenna, and then seeing how well it works. So let's go ahead and proceed with it. Let's go ahead and test it. When it was time to test it, I thought about leaving it turned on at the dock for many days to see how long the battery would last. But when after 4 days, it still had half its battery left, I decided to run a slightly more serious test. Anything for you? I had to truly test it. How was I going to test it in just one day around the Bay of Santander? How could I confirm it really went far enough? I had to at least try it on a trip of a couple of days, or at least that's what I told my wife. This week, I am really taking full advantage of the fact that you're working, and since I'm on vacation, I needed to record a few things for the channel. Either way, I had to spend a couple of days sailing around out there on my own.
A couple of days?
Well, it's to record a device that transmits your location and things like that, and it's something that needs to be tested a bit offshore, out on the open sea.
And can you do it here?
Technically, it really can't be done here because it just wouldn't be a truly reliable test. And you know, I'm accountable to every single one of my followers, so you don't mind it, do you?
No. Alright, do what you want.
Okay, well then, I'll go ahead and get right to it, and ignoring all the subliminal messages in my wife's words, I went off to take the test. But you, Carlos, also believe it's essential to test it in this way.
It is an absolutely essential requirement.
And you will always remind my wife of it, of course.
Alright.
But please let it be absolutely clear that I did it for you, and the only way to prove it is for every one of you to confirm that to my wife as well, if she ever happens to ask you. So, I got ready to undertake a solo sailing trip for a few hours, from Santander to Laredo, spend the night there, and come back the next day. About 60 miles in total, more or less. The first thing I did right before leaving the harbor was to look for a good spot to place the beacon, and after trying out a few different places, I decided to secure it firmly on the backstone. I could have hoisted it on the end of the flagpole, but at least for this test, it didn't need to go that far. The next thing I needed to do was share the link to my location with all my friends who had turned down my invitation to come along with me because they are working or because they do not have the same ability to improvise that I still have, at least briefly and only for a short while. And with that, the journey begins. First, crossing the Bay of Santander, passing other boats that I could see on my own AIS while I prepared the sails for the crossing and stowed everything properly for the trip. Then for the very first test, just before I registered my MMSI in OpenPlotter, my Raspberry didn't recognize the AIS as its own, and that helped me quite a lot, because it allowed me to see, side by side, my position according to my boat's GPS, and also according to the AIS that it was transmitting. So you can see how one follows the other along the route. Please keep in mind that the beacon transmits once every 2 minutes, so there is a slight delay. After that, I began the long distance test. At first, I headed out sailing with very little wind. I didn't exactly get a very early start that day, and I was delayed a bit at the harbor as well, but in any case, I left Muro Island behind, which kind of marks the point when you're really heading out to sea, at least around here. And then I started to follow along the coast in the warm, summery weather we've been having this year around Santander. The threatening clouds just wouldn't stop trailing me for the entire journey. The first confirmations, together with the screenshots of my position that my friend sent me, confirmed that everything was working properly and that my position was showing up accurately in the tracker. So I kept going along the coast, passing in front of Angra Beach, a great anchorage and quiet because of how far out it is. Hardly anyone goes there because it takes a while to get there, although it is an anchorage only for daytime stays because the shelter is a bit limited. From there, you can immediately see Cape Quintres, which is the closest along the way. After approaching the famous Cape Ajo with its popular Okuda painted lighthouse, which, disappointingly or not, is only painted on the land-facing side, so from the sea it remains a normal and perfectly valid navigational marker.
The lighthouse? The lighthouse?
What's wrong with it?
Love or hate, you have to take a stand here.
Since I've seen it both from the land and also from the sea, I honestly don't really need to take any sides at all. If it brings people to paint it, and it doesn't actually mess up the signage, then just let them go ahead and paint it.
Love, truly love. Come on then.
Love to love.
I love it to death, shall we go?
People are genuinely bothered by changes. I mean, that's simply how it is. Anyway, let's go back to our story. Behind the lighthouse that isn't painted on the seaward side lies Arena Beach and its corresponding Ria de Ajo. It's a truly paradisiacal beach, especially for paddling in a kayak or a canoe, doing a bit of surfing, or even going along by boat. I once saw a boat kind of wedged in there, but I wouldn't trust putting mine in with the tides we have here, not a chance.
Maybe you can climb up that way with the Trastolillo.
With the Trastolillo, yes. What happens is that the Trastolillo can get that far, well, faster than mine, but it uses a lot more diesel. Around here, things were beginning to pick up, and I could already be sailing, so for the time being, the only refreshment was just a quick sandwich, so I wouldn't have to stop or make things more complicated by cooking myself a full meal. Along this entire stretch, the coastline is truly spectacular, with very impressive cliffs and very little in the way of coastal development. It also feels quite inaccessible from the landward side. However, as soon as you round Cape Quejo, civilization returns in all its full splendor, with the various beaches of Isla and Noja filled with little hidden coves, sheltered by a whole multitude of small islets and rocks, yet still very much civilized. I was already sailing along on a steady, consistent course under sail, with a clear view of Mount Buciero marking the boundary of Santoña Bay, my destination for that night. I had almost forgotten that I'd had the fishing rod out the entire way, with one of those classic Chinese lures I tend to buy when it rang out for the first time. That's when I ended up pulling out a needlefish. A small needlefish. And honestly, since I don't really fish very much, basically not at all, it was pretty much like what you'll see in the photos. I wasn't very sure whether it was actually edible or not, so I gently released it back into the water and it came back to life. And I cast my fishing rod again. This time I swapped my Chinese bait for my lucky Chinese bait. That one is absolutely amazing. It was so good that about halfway to Montebuciero, it went off again. This time it was much harder to pull it up out of the water because I'm usually not prepared to catch anything at all, since I never actually managed to catch anything anyway. So, being carried along by the sails and my autopilot, I hauled the catch up aboard. A sawfish of a really good size? What an incredible thrill! I mean, I was acting like a complete madman, but all alone. So nobody found out I was going crazy.
Well, you already took care of sending us 1,000 photos and calling us fish. Really fish, too.
Of course, just this once. Well, while the boat kept sailing along on its own with the autopilot engaged, and since I still had a full day left before heading back, I decided to take out the loins and cut them up so they would fit properly in the cooler. It wasn't really about disrespecting it, so much as the fact that I made a genuine mess in there. Honestly, there was even more blood than in Dexter, and it took quite a few buckets to make absolutely sure it was no longer filled with blood, and even better, that it wouldn't smell terrible the next day. But I did manage to achieve my goal, which was to have dinner that night and also for the days ahead. Honestly, that time passed by so quickly, and I was already approaching the fishermen's lighthouses, which are the very first ones you come across, and shortly after that, the famous Horse Lighthouse, with its 685 steps carved directly into the mountain. One of the most spectacular routes along the coast, whether you go on foot, paddling along, or traveling by boat, and now in the summer it's almost always completely packed with visitors. So that afternoon, I did not even stop there. I kept going, already entering the Bay of Santoña, and at the end of Arenal de Laredo, across from the yacht club, I found the perfect anchorage to spend the night. There were 3 small boats there along with us, and the night was incredibly calm. You just need to make sure you've anchored in a spot with sufficient depth and with enough rode out, because here there's about a 4-meter difference between tides. So you might have anchored somewhere that later ends up going dry and the boat winds up listing over, or you might have let out rode, for example, thinking there are only 2 meters of depth, and then 6 hours later there are 6 meters of depth, and then what happens? And your anchor's dragging like that and you're already in Cuenca at least. And I went to prepare dinner with what I caught that night. I had planned to eat it outside at the outdoor table, but with the summer we've had around here, the rain forced me to do it inside, in front of the TV. The Localiza Todo track indicates it was a somewhat eventful night, but I have actually found that when moored in the harbor, the GPS is not as accurate as those on other AIS units, although it is more than sufficient for its purpose, so in reality these are position shifts or GPS inaccuracies. In any case, I slept like a log, but I got up early and didn't waste the next morning, and before leaving for Santander with a few rays of sunshine, I decided to get a bit of exercise, and what better than the toys I keep in my garage, as you may have seen in my boat tour videos. And then I went for a nice ride around the bay on the inflatable SUP, along the sandbar, and also by the cliffs that lead toward Faro del Caballo, just in case the sea was not in very good condition. Before heading back to Santander, I ate in a calm, unhurried way before setting off. I still had quite a lot of hard work ahead of me, and I started the return trip right away, running into one of the regattas being held that day, where there were a bunch of boats that I recognized. The return trip didn't have any major setbacks, although when rounding Mount Buciero, it usually brings a fairly strong headwind, and it stays a headwind the whole time as you make that turn. Once you get out of its influence, it gradually eases off, and at first it turned into something more like a beam breeze. But as we kept moving along and toward the end of the route, with the change of course, it became a really good downwind run that carried me along at 5 knots, with the sails goose-winged. And so I kept moving forward until I was welcomed again by Muro Island, entered the bay, calmly docked at my mooring, and that was the end of the race. Now I can go back home and my wife can finally tell me where she is. Well, honestly, I've really liked this Chinese AIS that I bought. I truly have. It has some quite good points and it also has a few bad ones. But overall, I'm genuinely very happy with the purchase I ended up making. As for the good things, it's that it's completely self-contained, water resistant, that is in the end it's something that doesn't require a complex installation, and you just turn it on when you want to turn it on, and turn it off when you want to turn it off, and on top of that, you place it outside the boat. On the day when all of your electronics fail, on the day when you completely run out of battery, this system will still keep working and the other boats will still be able to see you. In those respects, I am very pleased indeed. What I like the least is that there is a certain issue. Well, what I don't like very much is that it displays its own battery level in one of the boat's data fields, so it ends up seeming like the boat's length is being determined by the battery level. So sometimes it looks like the boat is way too big, and other times it looks like the boat is far too small. That has led me to set the rest of the boat data to 0, the rest of the data related to the boat's beam and draft, so that it is clearly obvious the data has been filled in incorrectly, but it is not something that really worries me. And another thing, which isn't that it's something negative, but rather something that would be very positive, is if it had a panic button or something like that that would also send an SOS alert, because then it would already be a terrific device, since it would be a self-contained beacon in case you end up adrift, lose control, or anything happens to you. Those are the aspects that have convinced me most, and the ones that I've been less convinced by them. In the end, I went ahead and bought it, and I'm genuinely very happy with it. It may not be officially certified by the General Directorate of the Merchant Marine, but my idea is to use it in low visibility situations, at moments where the risk to the boat is high enough that it's really worth having it connected. And then I really loved it, and I really liked the possibility with that Localiza Todo page of seeing what you saw in the video, of going back in time and seeing how all the boats are moving, including yourself, or sharing your location with your friends via a link, and that simply by having the beacon turned on, everyone is receiving your location at all times, even if you do not have battery on your phone, even if you do not have an internet connection. Those are my conclusions.
Catching sawfish with AIS is not guaranteed.
I neither confirm nor deny that the radiation emitted by the AIS attracts sawfish to the boat, and is the reason that for the first time in almost the history of humanity, I've caught something decent from this boat. Thank you very much for your kind attention, sailors. I truly hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, please give us a like, leave a comment below, and feel free to ask us anything you would like. You have all the links in the video description, and I truly hope it's completely clear to you where that description is located, both on the website and on mobile, as well as on our own website. You can subscribe to the channel very easily just by clicking the subscribe button, and you also have the well-known little bell to receive notifications each and every time we share a new video. So we will see you again in just a couple of weeks in a brand new episode of The Low Cost Sailor.
This blazing sunshine isn't typical.
This bright sunshine is not representative of the city of Santander. That is because summer ended yesterday, and now the nice weather is starting.